When I was younger, Memorial Day felt like the unofficial beginning of summer. School was ending, people were grilling burgers, heading to the lake, spending time with family, enjoying a long weekend. And all of that is great, of course. We're grilling burgers today. But as I've gotten older, I began realizing there's a weight underneath this holiday that we should never lose sight of because Memorial Day, and I know this is a heavy thought, but this day exists for one reason. People died. Young men and women who never got to grow old. Husbands and wives who never came home. Fathers and mothers who missed graduations, weddings, grandchildren, and entire futures because they chose to serve something bigger than themselves. And I think one of the reasons this holiday matters so much right now is because we're living in a culture that increasingly avoids the very virtues Memorial Day points us back toward: sacrifice, courage, responsibility, duty, gratitude. Those words may sound old-fashioned to some people now, but they still matter deeply. In fact, I think they're a part of what holds families, communities, and even nations together. Years ago, I remember reading survivor stories from the Titanic. What struck me wasn't only the scale of the tragedy itself, but the stories of the men aboard that ship. As panic spread and people realized the Titanic was sinking, many of the men stayed behind. Not because they weren't afraid, of course they were afraid, but because they believed somebody else should go in the lifeboat first. Women, children, families. In the end, 73% of the women survived while 80% of the men perished. Some of those men stood on the deck in freezing darkness, knowing they likely would not survive the night, and yet they still stayed. There's something about that kind of courage that reaches into us emotionally because deep down, every one of us recognizes it when we see it. We know sacrifice when we see it. We know courage when we see it. And we admire it. And maybe one of the reasons those stories still move us all these years later is because they remind us of something true about human nature. At our best, we are capable of extraordinary selflessness, not just survival, but sacrifice. I think that's part of why Memorial Day affects us emotionally too. When we remember soldiers who willingly stepped into danger for people they would never meet, something inside of us recognizes the goodness of that. Even in a cynical culture, people still instinctively honor courage. We still admire people willing to lay themselves down for the sake of others. And honestly, I think we need reminders of that right now because modern culture increasingly teaches us to organize life around comfort, convenience, personal happiness, and self-protection. But if you really think about it, almost everything meaningful in life requires a degree of sacrifice. Marriage does, parenting does, leadership does, friendship does, faith does. All of these things require sacrifice. Even love itself requires it. You cannot build a meaningful life while avoiding cost. And that's especially true in fatherhood. One of the things I've realized as I've gotten older is that good fathers live lives filled with quiet sacrifice that almost nobody notices. A good dad spends years laying parts of himself down for the people he loves. He works when he's tired. He keeps showing up when life gets heavy. He carries responsibility quietly. He worries quietly. He sacrifices comfort, time, energy, convenience, often sleep, and personal freedom because people are depending upon him. Most of that never gets applauded. There are no standing ovations for the father who gets up early every morning for 30 years and goes to work to provide for his family. Nobody gives awards to the husband who quietly remains faithful, responsible, and emotionally present year after year. But that doesn't make those sacrifices small. In many ways, they are the glue that holds families together. In 1995, when we started our church that I pastored, money was very tight. With barely a full-time salary and my wife at home with our 3-year-old, I took a second job delivering newspapers, 3:30 a.m. wake-ups, 6 days a week. Now, I'm not extraordinary. It's just what fathers do. We provide even when it costs us. I think millions of fathers have stories like that. Different details maybe, but the same heart behind them. Fathers quietly doing what needs to be done because somebody is counting on them. Most of the time it shows up in ordinary moments. It's playing catch when you're exhausted, turning off the game because your daughter needs to talk, taking the extra shift, putting off new work boots so your child can have new school clothes, staying patient when you're stressed, hiding worry when your kids need your strength. Your children may not fully understand these sacrifices while they're young, but they feel them. Those moments shape them. They teach children what it means to have skin in the game for the ones that you love. And maybe that's one reason stories of sacrifice resonate so deeply with us, because deep down, we know the best parts of life are usually built by people willing to carry burdens for others. The more I think about courage, the more I realize it's probably happening all around us far more often than we notice. I think about first responders running toward danger while everybody else runs away. I think about military families enduring long separations and uncertainty. I think about nurses sitting beside suffering people late into the night. I think about parents raising children with special needs. I think about people fighting addiction and finally finding the courage to ask for help. I think about foster parents opening their homes or people adopting children in need. I think about teachers, counselors, pastors, and mentors continuing to pour themselves into others even when they're exhausted themselves. There are acts of courage happening around us every single day. Most of them will never trend online. Most of them will never make headlines, but they matter deeply. I think one of the greatest dangers of modern life is that comfort can slowly erode gratitude if we're not careful. Most of us live with conveniences previous generations could not even imagine. We have access to technology, transportation, food, entertainment, medical care, and opportunities that much of human history never experienced. And yet sometimes the more comfortable people become, the more entitled they become too. That's part of human nature. We start treating blessings like expectations instead of gifts. But Memorial Day interrupts that mindset if we allow it to. This holiday reminds us that many of the freedoms and comforts we enjoy were purchased through sacrifice. Somebody paid for them. Somebody carried burdens so future generations could live with greater freedom and opportunity. Somebody fought wars. Gratitude grows when we remember that. I've often said that one of the dangers in modern parenting is that we can become so focused on protecting our children from discomfort that we accidentally weaken some of the very qualities they need most in life. We want life to be easier for them than it was for us. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that desire. Every loving parent wants good things for their children. But courage is usually formed through challenge, not comfort. My wife, Amy, is a licensed professional counselor, and one of the things she sees often is that many people were never really taught how to face adversity. They were rescued from every struggle, protected from every discomfort, stretched from failure, and as adults, they now feel overwhelmed by ordinary life problems because resilience was never developed. That doesn't mean we become harsh or cold as parents. It doesn't mean we intentionally make life difficult for our kids. But it does mean we should remember that strength is usually forged through overcoming hard things, not avoiding them. Some of the strongest people you know were shaped by hardship they had to overcome. The men and women we honor this weekend were not people who organized their lives around comfort. They believed some things were worth sacrifice, worth risk, worth courage. They know a truth many of us miss. You always pay a price for what you value. Freedom, family, duty, other people, and faith. That mindset feels increasingly rare today because modern culture constantly pushes us toward self-focus instead of service. Everything becomes about personal happiness, personal fulfillment, personal convenience, personal comfort. And I think we all know the most meaningful lives are usually the lives spent serving something greater than ourselves. It's certainly true in the lives we remember on Memorial Day. Healthy societies only function because somebody is willing to carry responsibility for the benefit of others. Everywhere you find stability, protection, healing, leadership, or care, you usually find somebody quietly sacrificing for the sake of other people. And I think that's one of the reasons Memorial Day matters so much. It reminds us that freedom itself depends on people willing to carry burdens other people would rather avoid. That kind of courage usually isn't built in one dramatic moment. It's formed slowly over years through ordinary choices, integrity, responsibility, sacrifice, and continuing to show up when it would be easier not to. And if you're one of the people who carry this kind of weight for others day in and day out, no matter what you do, I hope today you feel peace, pride, and a greater sense of resolve. And as a Christian, I can't think about sacrifice without thinking about Jesus, because ultimately the cross is the greatest picture of sacrificial love the world has ever seen. Scripture says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." That's exactly what Christ did. He willingly stepped into suffering, humiliation, and death, not because he was powerless, but because love compelled him to do so. The cross reminds us that real love sacrifices, it serves, it gives. So this Memorial Day, absolutely enjoy your family. Rest, laugh, grill burgers, go make some memories. But somewhere in the middle of it all, pause long enough to remember why this holiday exists. Lead your family today, Dad. Say a few words. Ask your kids what this day means. Talk about it. Then give a prayer of thanks, not just for the food, but for our nation and for those who died to secure it for us. And maybe one of the best ways we can honor those we remember this weekend is by refusing to become people who live with liberty and then take it for granted, who only live for ourselves. Instead, we can be people and raise a family marked by gratitude instead of entitlement, by remembering that freedom is fragile, character matters, courage still matters, and some things are still worth sacrificing for. So today, on this special day, Dad, lean in, lead well, and love big.